There's a huge benefit to beginner's mind sometimes when you don't know what the limitations are. And that was that was one of the ahas that I have. It's like, well, if I'd known I couldn't do it, I probably wouldn't have.
Welcome to the Why STEM podcast, brought to you by STEM Vice 360, where we ignite curiosity, break barriers, and empower the next generation of STEM leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Ramesh Maduri, an educator, a leader, and advocate for making STEM education accessible, inspiring, and transformative. Whether you're a student, an educator, a professional, or just someone who is passionate about STEM education, this podcast is for you. My guest today is a powerhouse in the world of tech, leadership, and mentorship. She's worked for global companies, has been instrumental in shaping Colorado's tech landscape, and has spent much of her career supporting the next generation of leaders, especially young women, find their place in tech and business. But beyond all the titles and accolades, she's simply someone who believes that technology is about people and about creating opportunities for all. I'm thrilled to welcome to the Why STEM podcast, Frannie Matthews. Frannie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's indeed a privilege to have you here so you could share sort of that insight with us, because the last time we had the conversation, I was sort of inspired by the work that you have done. So let's dive right in. You've had a remarkable career in technology leadership. Can you take us back? What was your path into the world of technology like? Where in education did you start?
Well, it'll be interesting. First of all, it's kind of funny because I just stumbled into it. So I will tell you, from the genesis was in high school. When I was 16 years old, I grew up in Orlando, Florida. Mm-hmm. I wanted to work on a front desk in a hotel. And so here I am. I have virtually no work experience. I worked at Walt Disney World for a few months, but that was all I had. And I was trying to figure out how I could differentiate myself. So I went to the technical school that was just down the street from where I lived and learned how to be a switchboard operator.
Wow. Okay.
So I went in and interviewed at a La Quinta, and I got the job because I had taken the initiative to take that night class and learn how to use the equipment. So that was kind of the beginning. And then I graduated from college. I went to University of Florida with a marketing degree, and I wound up going into hospitality because that's what I was used to. And I got into the technology behind it and wound up getting a job with Micros, which is now part of Oracle.
Okay.
And so my initial onset, I literally was doing hex programming. I know. We'll talk about that. Was that fundamental knowledge important? Kinda.
So from basically the hospitality industry, that's where you started?
Yes.
So you were focused on the tech side in hospitality?
Yes.
And then, so where was that big transition? Where did you decide no longer hospitality, but something else?
Well, I wound up after, the Micros was a POS system, which is a fancy word for electronic cash register.
Okay.
So there were a lot of things that were happening at the time with back-end inventory and trying to figure out stuff. And I became fascinated with what technology could do to improve the business.
Okay.
And I went to work after that with a small software company that was focused on the hospitality industry. And after that, I jumped into NCR. Okay. And that was my first big company. And I'm going to tell you, I took a job selling mainframes to a territory that had no mainframes. And what they didn't tell me that NCR had not sold a new mainframe in a very long time. And I went out and did it because that was my job. I didn't know it, and I sold a mainframe, and confetti fell out of the sky. They like, she really did it.
So they didn't believe that you, even though they gave you the job,
That's right.
they didn't believe that you were going to be able to do it because it hasn't been done in such a long time.
Yeah, they kind of parked me there. Let's see what she can do with this. And I didn't know any better. So there's a huge benefit to beginner's mind sometimes when you don't know what the limitations are. And that was kind of that was one of the ahas that I have. It's like, well, if I'd known I couldn't do it, I probably wouldn't have.
You know what? It's funny you say that beginner's mindset. Can I take you back just a little bit? I'd love some context around your high school experience. What was that like?
Well, I went to, like I said, I grew up in Central Florida, and at the time, the space program was huge.
Space. Okay.
And so we had many teachers that were that were engineers that had decided to pivot into teaching.
Okay.
And that was really, helpful for centering on STEM. I was always good at math. I'm not so good at reading. And in fact, I'm probably dyslexic and was...
Probably. You don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. But indications would say that I am. That, I have short working memory. There's a lot of things that go with dyslexia that I have. And part of me is like, it's okay that I was never diagnosed because I've adapted. And it was the time. But if you look at my test scores, you'd go, there's something going on here.
But because you weren't diagnosed, that wasn't a limitation for you. No one said this was the case.
Right.
So you never saw that as a limitation.
Yeah.
How important...
Well, I will say, there. Once I kind of looked at it and went, wow, this is probably what's going on. It was an emotional experience for me because there were reading exercises that had just had me in a sheer panic. And when I took the SAT, I had to make up for stuff with vocabulary or analogies because that reading section, I knew I was going to bomb. And I did. I mean, it showed. So it's like the data was there.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. Here is Frannie, right? Knowing that she's probably dyslexic, but this never stopped you.
Yeah.
How did you ensure that this thing that you thought you had, how did you ensure that this never stopped you?
I think I did workarounds. I did a lot of workarounds. I also did a lot of, taking the edge off where the weaknesses were. I was never going to make the weakness my strength, but I could work to take it so it wasn't really holding me back. The other thing is I had parents that were really kind of had this, basic idea that you set your mind to something and you can do it. In fact, my dad had me memorize a poem that was somebody said that it couldn't be done. And I literally, I was speaking at a sales rally at IBM, and I at the end of it, I recited the poem from memory, and I don't think anybody remembered anything I actually said other than the poem. I had people go, "Can you send me that poem?"
Okay, so now here you are. You sort of identified what your strengths are from early, but also you've identified the area that you're not strong in, right? What inspired you to get into leadership then? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you thought, hey, you know what? I'm strong in this area, but I also had this weakness, for want of a better term. What inspired you to get into leadership?
I like people.
Okay.
And I really am enthralled with ideas and problems, problem solving. I think that comes from a math, bent. And so I really loved working with people to figure out how we're going to get something done. And so I had a lot of, early on, I had a lot of informal, like team lead kind of positions where you'd get a disparate group of people together and figure out how you're going to attack a problem or, make a sale.
Did you develop that from the hospitality side?
Little bit.
Little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When you're front facing, as I said, I was at a La Quinta where people were checking in on Friday night and checking out on Sunday morning, and I loved those two shifts because I was making people happy, getting them in their rooms, and doing it really efficiently. And I loved that interaction, and and I learned there, if you've got a problem, it's like an oil light. It's not going to go away.
If you have a problem, it's like an oil light. It's not going to go away. Okay, that's the first.
Yeah, so you learn. I mean, I was 16, and I'm on a and if somebody says their air conditioner's broken, you can't ignore it.
Okay. Facts. I appreciate that. So now that you've decided, hey, I want to get into leadership because I love people and I love problem solving. You led the Colorado Technology Association through a transformative time. What were some of your proudest accomplishments?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of them. But I just had a lunch with a couple of the people that were on the leadership team yesterday. And we all said it was a magical time because we got handed, we were doing our biggest fundraiser, and it was in March at the, like 2 weeks before. And March 13th, we sent everybody home. And we had to pivot our entire business model. We were a nonprofit, but it's a business.
Of course.
And get people pulled together. And so I think the biggest thing is that we realized that doing nothing was going to be failure. So we had to do something bold, and we put on the largest virtual event that had been done when the pandemic started. We did it in July of 20. We had 1,100 people participate. And boy, were we scared. We found a company in the UK that was going to be the platform. We used Zoom as an integrated source, and we all had social distance in this control center, and it all worked. And we looked at each other and the COO goes, "This is kind of boring." It all worked. We're not panicking. And so that was, again, you find out, what you can do. And it was really scary. We had somebody from the UK stay up all night to make sure that we didn't go down. And everything went swimmingly.
It appears you do not have a fear of failure. It appears that failure is not an impediment to you.
Oh, I must be doing a good job of, I actually do have a pretty big fear of failure, but I'll suck it up.
You'll suck it up. So how do you decide? Because, the fear of failure is often crippling to so many people.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that this fear that you say you have, we don't see it, but this fear that you say you have, how do you ensure that it's not crippling to you? And how do you not translate that fear to the people you're working with?
A lot of times, if you look at it, like doing nothing is a decision. So if you do nothing, and you have a pretty good handle that's going to be a marginalized outcome, that is a form of failure.
Okay.
So you have to take some level of risk to try something new, and sometimes you flop a little bit, but I'm a big believer in trying something iteratively and make small steps if you can afford to do that. Okay. So that in fact, at CTA, when we looked at how we could improve the organization, it was a lot of small things that we did along the way that made a big difference on growing the organization. So, and we got handed the pandemic, which we were all very fortunate. We were all healthy. We were able to work without reducing the team. And so we felt a level of privilege in just being able to do it. So I don't know, I think I do fear failure, and it makes me work harder to not fail. But I don't step away from something so that I can stay in a comfort zone.
Okay. You've served on multiple boards relating to AI, smart cities, and education. What do you think the future of STEM education should look like?
Well, it's I would say the elephant in the room is actually absolutely AI.
Okay.
And I also say the elephant that we don't talk about as much is quantum.
Okay.
And so quantum is further along. That I mean, it's coming along pretty quickly, and there's probably an inflection point that will happen in the next decade, and that changes a lot of stuff. Encryption doesn't work anymore once quantum is, so there's a lot of stuff there. And AI is, we look at this and go, oh boy, this could really affect entry-level jobs. But I look at it and say, the fundamentals of mathematics, the fundamentals of science, those are durable.
Okay.
And so then you look at if you're learning a specific coding language, that also has durability because it teaches you the process, the inner workings. Even if that gets automated through AI, your knowledge of how the logic works helps in your general critical thinking. And so you and I were laughing that hex programming, I literally did hex programming. So, I mean, most of the people that are listening to this don't even know what it is. But the reality is that I learned I learned about bits being turned on and off. And that is the fundamental of what the underbelly of computing is. And so you build on each thing.
But the average student now might say, I don't have to learn this. I could just type this into AI and it spits me out the answer. Why do I need to learn this?
Well, I think educationally they find that it's been found that it's important to know your your multiplication tables. So you're so much better foundationally if you understand the context of it. So, I mean, almost everybody has a scientific computer or a scientific calculator.
Yep.
So, but you don't want to lose the steps. Having to go through the steps over and over again. It can feel like you're wearing concrete boots. But on the other hand, understanding how it's working is important. I mean, I got taught how to use the slide rule. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, but it brings mathematics to a physical level. And so I think there's a lot of value in it. And it's a stepping stone to do the next thing.
So you're talking about like that application piece. It's so important to be able to apply the concept, right? And I agree with you. But in many regards, especially being a part of the K through 12 space, our students don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Just let me do this in 2 seconds. There's a machine that can do this in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Why do I need to spend 5 minutes to learn the concept while this machine is already created? And I think that's sort of where their mind is going these days. AI and all the things that's there to support them. It's no, they're using it as a crutch.
Yeah.
They're not trying to walk or learn the process anymore. They're just using these things as a crutch.
And I appreciate that the world is much different than when I was learning, but we all are lifelong learners. So I don't know. It's kind of like I have a friend whose son went to college, and he said, I can write all my papers with ChatGPT. And the father's response was, well, is that a good use of money? You can come home and do that from our basement.
Yeah.
So it's really, and not to get too philosophical, but it's really taking a look at what's the value of the human in this.
Okay.
And so, I think that the example that we just talked about is probably hovering on the maybe it just goes to AI, but at one point or another, you have to say, what's our value going to be? And I think that we all need to be thinking about how are we adapting to the environment as it's changing, and boy, is it changing rapidly.
All right, so
I want to ask you how you'd answer that question.
how I would answer that question, I think there's an importance in being able to think critically.
Yeah.
And I think what has happened with AI, it's taking away our ability to think. Our students are no longer going through that thought process.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's retarding our mental capacity. I've, had instances where I say in a class, what is 2 times 5? And everyone pulls out a phone to go
Yeah.
plug this into their calculators.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, especially in the K through 12 space, that when you're talking about simple mathematics, teachers say, I don't want to see any phones or no calculators. As a matter of fact, when I taught engineering, I would start with fundamental measurements and units, and I'd say no phones or no calculators.
Right.
And that would take me a solid 2-3 weeks before the students would their minds start working again.
Yes.
For them to be like, all right, okay, this is what they're asking, I can solve this mentally.
Right.
But prior to, they're always going to take the easy way out.
Well, I've had this conversation with my husband. Is that we have a drive for efficiency, and I think that is actually hampering us because we need a little bit of friction
We do.
in order to grow.
We
and
do.
if you just sit on the couch and don't do anything, you don't have any friction, but you're not growing.
You're definitely not growing. And I think the students who are willing to go through that process, and I think parent involvement is so important.
Yeah.
Because the parents have the opportunity to ensure that, hey, you're going to learn this and I'm going to support you learning it. It's not about plugging in this thing into a machine and it spits you out an answer.
Yeah.
You need to understand the why behind this answer, not the answer itself.
Yes.
Because the context will change. And when you're able to think critically, irrespective of the change in the context, you're going to be able to think through that process.
I agree. And I mean, you and I have talked a little bit about durable skills.
Yes.
And those durable skills are those that are going to last a lifetime. But perishable skills can be a petri dish for
Yeah.
growing your durable skills.
Yes.
And so, I took Fortran. Who cares?
So listen, Frannie's saying you need to learn these fundamental skills. It cannot be that you're so dependent on technology that your mental capacity has gone to the level where you're not able to think critically and problem solve. And it sounds to me that your ability to problem solve and work with people are sort of those fundamental skills that you've used over the years.
I think so. I think that whatever you like to do, you tend to be better at.
Which is true.
And you develop curiosity for being better at something. I think. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. So you've also worked closely with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade on their Advanced Industries Grant Program.
Yes.
How important is public-private collaboration in building strong STEM pipelines?
I think it's really important. I think just in general, whether it's STEM pipelines into education or STEM pipelines into business, it's really critically important that there's an ecosystem where individuals can thrive.
Okay.
So that program will allow, somebody has a great idea, they don't have enough money to get it jump started, but they've got enough to, they're not going to, fall off the cliff because they ran out of money, but they're not going to take it to the next level. That program is awesome for helping somebody with a great idea take it into the next level. And it's also very community oriented. There's people from all over the community in different sectors that are watching these pitches and the applications. And there's a real sense of stewardship of taxpayer dollars. And so that has been I'm not doing it anymore, but I would like to probably rejoin that when I've got a little more time because it's a fabulous program.
Awesome. So you've broken through many leadership ceilings as a woman in technology. What barriers did you face along the way?
I think that there sometimes is an assumption that you don't look like a lot of people that are hiring you. And so as a result, there is unconscious bias, and it happens every once in a while. And you've got to make a decision: are you going to bow your back, and call out, or are you going to make a, say this, obviously this isn't where I want to be and I'm going to go someplace else. There's a lot of things. So that takes critical thinking because, what I have done in the past, sometimes you, in a corporation, you wind up in a reorg and you wind up with a seat you don't want. Okay. And you see somebody else got the seat that you were qualified for. And so I had one of those where I sat down with my vice president. I asked for, they called it an executive interview, and you could just ask for one. And I said, here's what I want to do, and here's what I think we need to be doing. And I was organized with a PowerPoint and handed it to him and it was basically getting into higher value and higher margin areas in the product line that we were using or we were covering. And he called me 2 hours later. He goes, I just got out of a meeting, and Global is going to put this together. What you had, so you never know if you've got a good idea. It's probably popping up in some variation someplace else. Put it on paper, get organized, and then communicate it. So I could have walked away at the time from that company, but I stayed with it and wound up doing something that I really loved for like 2.5 years.
So it sounded to me like you had an idea, but you were willing to step out on the limb to go talk to this executive, right?
Yeah.
So many people would be afraid.
They put their pants on one leg at a time.
Frannie says they put their pants on. So there's no reason to be afraid.
No.
They're human beings just like you.
They're human beings just like anybody is.
And the ideas you have just might be the idea they're looking for.
Right.
And you would know unless you put that, as you say, prepare yourself and put that idea forward.
And good leaders are looking for good ideas and people that are coming up with them.
Good leaders are looking for good ideas and people that are coming up with them.
Now, there's an antithesis to that. We don't need to go into it. So you might, put a lot of work in, tell it to somebody. Maybe it's not a great idea, but you did it. And maybe they weren't bright enough to see your idea. So,
Maybe they weren't the person to hear the idea.
That's right.
So there's still a positive in you preparing yourself as well.
Yep.
You might present it to the first 4. They weren't the person. But person number 5
That's right.
is the person. But by the time you get to them, you'd have done it so many times. You're so prepared
That's right.
to be able to present it the right way.
Yes.
Wonderful. How do you advise emerging women leaders today about overcoming the idea of imposter syndrome?
Oh, boy. I think about this a lot because the imposter syndrome is kind of the negative of humility. And so humility is good. Okay. You don't want to be
I agree.
brash and not self-aware. You want to take a look at it. But sometimes it feels like there's something sitting on your shoulder that's like talking in your ear and saying, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. And that you have to recognize. And it's hard. And so it does take, I have imposter syndrome all the time. And when you do something new, you're going to have imposter syndrome. When I left, I was leading sales teams at IBM and went to CTA as the CEO. I'm like, holy cow, what do I know about running a small nonprofit organization? Well, as it turned out, I had gained a lot of skills over here. And it went to logic and problem solving. And so I absolutely felt imposter syndrome. And I got over it pretty quickly when I got small wins. So you got to, it's like a veneer. If you can break through it. And I think it also helps to have people talking in your ear on the other shoulder that are real people that are saying, you can do this.
What about the idea of like a mantra? Like I have something that I repeat to myself every day. Like,
yes.
And it's one of those things that's the first thing when I get up in the morning, I want to say to myself.
Yeah.
And it's not mine. I got it from a book and it says, infinite intelligence leads and guides me in all my ways. Perfect health is mine and the law of harmony operates in my mind and body. Beauty, peace, love, and abundance are mine. The principles of right action and divine order governs my entire life. And I know that my major premise is based on the eternal truths of life, and I know, think, and believe that my subconscious responds to the nature of my conscious mind thinking. Now, this was something that I read.
Wait a minute, pause. That was awesome.
It's so funny that I read this thing in a book, I want to say 2019 or 2000.
Yeah.
But when I read the phrase, it speak to me so much. And I said, all right, cool, I need to remember this thing.
Yes.
And it took me a solid month and a half just over and over, just reciting it to where it's no longer that I'm even saying it. Like it's like the person on the side of the shoulder.
Yeah.
That's reciting it to myself. And a lot of times I'm going to speak at an event and I'm listening to that person.
Yes.
Over and over. And of course the other person's on the other side. I'm like, I ain't listening to you.
Yeah.
Just shut up. Right?
Yeah.
But I'm listening to the
bothering me.
Yeah, you're bothering me, right? But we all need that.
Yes.
And as you say, that other person might be someone else in your organization, a friend, someone.
Yes.
But we need that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, early on, I was working for a small software company and not selling enough, and I got fired. Frannie got fired. I highly recommend getting fired in your career, because all of a
Say that
sudden,
again. Say it
I highly recommend getting fired in your career. Yes, she said that, because it shows you can. I mean, it gives you the understanding that you can be resilient. And I went in, and as I was leaving the office, I went in to a friend and I said, I'm leaving, I just got fired. And she burst out laughing. She just started laughing. Yeah, right. And that was the biggest affirmation that I could have gotten, because she just could not believe I could have gotten fired.
Wow. Listen, and even for me, the idea of being fired with wife and kids, it's such a, like, the heart starts pumping, because what do I do?
Right.
But I will say, having had the situation where someone says, hey, you know what, I think this is not working out for you, you need to consider something else, it really causes you to think critically. It's like time slows down.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at all the options.
Yeah.
And you're cutting through the fluff, because you know, hey, this, whatever is the next move, has to work.
Right. Yes.
It has to. You have no option. Failure is not an option right here, because at the end of the day, this is so much bigger than you. So I agree with you in regards to that. I'm not saying you have to get fired, but at the end of the day, when you are placed in a situation, it forces you to think in ways that you would not normally think.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that is what you're essentially saying. When you got fired and someone says, you're kidding, you did that. Yeah. Frannie got fired? Nah.
Right. And all of a sudden I was lifted, like, oh, okay, well, let me go out and get another job. And I got a much better job.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those jumps. And that's one of the things also from a career perspective, is very few people have this linear, I get on this track and I'm going to do this. It does this, and then it does that, and then it might do this, and then it might plateau for a while, and then something else is going to happen. But I've never heard of anybody, unless they're like just poking along, that is meh.
Okay, so you're saying that irrespective of the situation you're placed in, you're in there for a reason.
Yeah.
And you should utilize the skills, the knowledge, the things you have, the resources you have accessible to you for the next thing.
Yeah.
This is happening to you because there's something else that you need to go to, which is bigger than where you currently are.
Yeah.
Okay. And you need to be willing to make that jump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what if someone's not fired? What if you don't get fired?
Well, if you're not, I think you need to be taking a look at the environment that you're in. And are you being challenged? Are you there because you're comfortable? Or, I think that, comfort can be very dangerous. And in times wherein things are going as quickly as they are, comfort is not your friend.
Comfort is not a good thing.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's right.
To be successful in today's
Yeah.
society. All right. So the tech industry is still working toward greater inclusion. What more do you think can be done?
Oof. Well, it starts out at I would say K through 12.
Okay.
And I see some good things happening in Colorado. I did a lot of work at St. Vrain Valley School District, and they had P-TECH programs, and I saw really good things happening with the cohorts that were going through those P-TECH programs. And the early cohort that I was involved in, 60% women. And I don't know what the other characteristics were, but it was definitely a more diverse group than you see in the tech industry in general. We at CTA were really cognizant of it, so we made sure that we were looking at how we were, serving in the community, who was coming to our events, who was on stage, who was on our board, and who was on our staff.
So representation matters too.
Yes, it does, and it also gives you a sense of you make better decisions when you've got a myriad of voices in the room. And so, for us in the United States, I think we really need to step back on some things, because you look at, and I'm aware of gender parity or lack thereof in the United States. In a lot of the Scandinavian countries, we don't have any difference in test scoring. In math test scoring, like in Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, it's negligible on how girls test and boys test for math.
What do you think that is?
It's hard to say. I think that there's probably, taking a look at what the preferences are for how girls learn, and making sure that it's not, it's conducive. I had heard I heard the president of the Girl Scouts speak a few years ago, and she talked about the fact that girls need more relevance in the problem solving. And so if they're figuring out a robotics for helping their grandmother eat, then they're more engaged.
They're
and
more inclined.
I have absolutely seen, my youngest daughter is a data scientist.
Okay.
And we had to put, speaking of multiplication tables, we put the equations on the outside of our cabinets in the kitchen, and on the inside we put the answers to get her through multiplication tables. I know. She can still look at the pantry and go, 48.
But that's parenting that took the time to understand the needs of their child and then put the right systems in place to support the child.
But it was the math teacher in elementary school that saw that she had a proclivity toward math, but she was like, she had deficiencies on the fundamentals. And going back to, do you use a calculator? She said the fundamentals were really important. And then she had another teacher, math teacher in middle school, that did the same thing. He's like, she's really got it going on math, but she needs these things to happen. And she had a calculus teacher in high school who came to our house after Grace had been in a very bad car accident, and he came as she was recovering to help her get caught up in calculus. And so I look back, and she had a professor at CU that she was a TA for. So I see this line of math teachers that made a difference in her enthusiasm and her pursuit of math-related skills. And they should be praised.
They should
all the time.
So it appears that you, based on what you just shared, you formed sort of a seamless partnership with the teachers for your child as they progressed throughout the K through 12 space.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is for other parents to follow suit?
Oh, I think it's really important. But the other thing is that the relationship is between the teacher and the child. You're an enabler.
Okay.
And I think that if you're going in to solve your kids' problems, they're going to on the back end, they're going to have to learn to solve their problems some other way. So
And at that time, it's harder.
yes,
At that time, it's
that's
harder.
exactly right. So a whole lot easier when they're in fourth grade.
Okay.
But we, like the elementary school teacher, she said, if she's crying when she's doing her math homework, we need to do something. But let her be a little frustrated and see how she can run through these problems. But if it's causing her to say, I can't do this anymore. But again, that partnership with the teacher is really important, but you don't want to take it over.
I think a lot of parents do that.
Yeah.
They see the child going through sort of this mental frustration, and they just swoop in and solve the problem.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're creating a worse situation for
That's
the
right.
child.
Yeah.
When you do that. Okay.
I can tell you one other one.
Of course. Go
My
ahead.
other daughter, she had a math test that she bombed. And she brought it home. She was freaked out that she bombed it. And she's a really good, hardworking student. And I'm like, well, you don't have other, it's not like you bombed 4.
Yeah.
You bombed 1.
It's only one.
And she bombed it because there was some distraction in the room. And, that was, she was just really upset over it. I'm like, do you have to return this to the teacher? Like, do I have to sign it? She said, no. I'm like, well, let's burn it. So we burned it in the kitchen sink. Now, I said, you're never allowed to play with fire, but it's worthwhile.
This one, we
can burn. I'm turning the water right on, and we're going to burn it right in the kitchen sink.
What did that do for her, mentally? What did that
Well,
do?
she was a little freaked out. Her mother burnt a piece of paper in the kitchen, that's for sure. But I said, it's one point in time. You got to chill sometimes. You're not going to have, it's not linear.
It's not linear. Okay. So based on what you shared, it seems that mentorship played a big role throughout the process, even for your child.
Yeah.
And I think these teachers that you referenced at some point or another were
Yes.
mentors to her
Oh, absolutely.
as they progressed. So mentorship is central to you, your work, and even the family. How did this become such a personal mission for you then?
I think there were people in my life early on, and my parents being 2 of them, that made a difference to me. And I didn't really see a lot of professional women when I was growing up. I did see a lot of people that were focused on engineering and stuff, so I kind of had that. But I realized once I could see somebody else doing it, and I could, it made it easier to go to the next level and say, oh, I could be that. And so once I figured that out, I realized that that's something that you need to have a hand out to help somebody else see that. So I got involved in mentoring at, St. Vrain, and then also at CU Boulder. And that has been very rewarding because some of the people that I mentored, they'd be, one instance, one was interviewing for a job and they had a case study in this interview. I mean, it was a real bear of a case study. Well, another person that I had mentored it was a case study subject matter expert. I connected the 2 of them. She not only helped her on it, and she was like, she gave her some tough love. She's like, nah, you got to redo this. And I was a little bit reticent to do that. They also became friends. And then they wound up, both of them had Salesforce experience, and they wound up kind of helping each other in their careers. And that you like, wow, now you're creating a community. And I was thinking about your mantra, and what I was thinking about is that psyche spills out onto everybody that you're. And so that's, how can you make a difference in the world? You start with you, and it spills out.
So true, because a lot of times people say, Ramesh, you're so inspirational. And in my mind, I'm going, bruh, I'm just trying to inspire me. This is what I'm telling you is the thing I'm telling myself.
Right.
And it has worked for me because I've been telling myself this for a few years. You're
Yes.
just seeing, it looks fancy now.
Yeah.
But this is 4 years in the making.
Right.
This is me trying to ensure that when I step out, I'm stepping out in an authentic way, but I'm also
Yes.
believing in myself and my capabilities, right? So it might look fancy to you,
Right.
but this is me talking to myself in front of the mirror.
Right.
This is me talking to myself on the drive to work,
Yes.
right? It just looks fancy to you now.
Well, your sticky notes. Do you do sticky notes?
No, you know what? I journal. I'm the guy that spends time to journal.
Yeah.
Every day, at least 5 minutes, I'm finding a time. And even if I'm not writing it, like physically writing, I might be typing it on the phone.
Yeah.
But I think to myself, how was my day? How did I impact the person that I engage with? Because one of the things I'd love to do is to ensure that everyone who I come in contact with, their life is somehow better.
Yes.
Because it could be a 5-minute conversation.
Yes.
But when I leave, they should say, all right, cool, I feel a little bit better because I had a conversation with this guy. And once I can do that, once I've sat down and said, all right, cool, you know what, that was good, I felt, all right,
Yeah.
today was a good day. It could be a simple win, just something simple. But I really enjoy the fact
Yes.
when I get to sort of share this with someone else.
Yeah.
Because I think I had people, mentors in my life that I shared similar things.
Yes.
And I hold on to their words, right? And I have one friend that says, you don't know what you're saying to the person, how it impacts them.
Right.
You don't know which one of the words they took.
Yes.
But definitely they took one.
Yeah.
You want to ensure that as best as you can, they're taking positive from the words that you're giving.
That's right. And sometimes to do the right thing by a person is you have to give them things that they don't necessarily want to hear. And to do that in a tender way is often hard, but it's a difference maker.
Yes. And a lot of times we don't want to hear the things we don't want to hear, right? I laugh all the time and I tell people all the time that my wife, if I present something to my wife and she says you could go to the street to present it, I'm so comfortable because she's picking everything apart.
Yeah.
And initially, I would say to myself, what's wrong with this woman? But I've gotten to realize, no, for real, I'm telling you, I tell her all the time. Initially, I was like, what's wrong with you? And I would bring good ideas, right? And I get to realize that it's coming through love. It's coming through the fact that she really wants the best to come forward. And many times, the questions that I have to answer for her is the question that someone asks me when I step outside. I'm like, oh, I already have that answer.
Yes.
No, I've gotten to a point where I say, babe, you know the question you had asked me? John asked me the same question when I went to present, right? So it's hard to hear initially, but I'd recommend to anyone that get used to hearing those things. And you need that person in your life. You need that person because they're consistently pushing you to be better.
I agree.
So it's not easy to hear. I'm telling you, it's not easy. But over the time, it has proven to be one of the best things that has happened to me because at the end of the day, it's like that consistent push. Okay, we are here. Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
We've gotten to 10. But how do we get to 11?
Yeah.
Right? So we keep pushing. What advice would you give to educators working to inspire more girls and underrepresented students to pursue STEM?
I would give them opportunities to see what the careers are. That's the biggest thing that I see is I just joined a board called STEM Blazers and is focused on introducing girls to STEM.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it is that if you don't know that something exists, how are you going to pursue it?
True.
And I also think that there's some, and this goes to the not having parity, is that there's something that, and I think it's changing rapidly, but like I hate it when I hear somebody say, "Oh, I do girl math." What's
What
that
is
mean? Yeah. I mean, but that's societally we have thwarted a lot of this because it looks nerdy or it's not feminine or I don't know. I think we really need to look at how we approach girls and give them the opportunity to be a part of this and feel like they own it. And I do think that things are getting better.
I think it's coming from a deficit mindset.
Yeah.
It's just like, because you're a girl,
Yeah.
I'm already thinking in my mind you're not able to accomplish certain things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You can do this.
Yeah.
You can definitely do this. And I won't water down the standard so it's easier for you.
Yeah.
I'll give you the supports
Yeah.
so you can get there. But the standard and the bar is what it is.
Well, an example, my same daughter, middle, not the one I burned the paper, the other one, but one of her projects in middle school was bungee Barbie. You had to put Bundy on a Barbie bungee cord and drop it from the top of the building, and not have her. If she hit the ground, you're toast. But if she's too high up, you're not going to win. You have to get her right there, and they had to do a physics calculation on how to do this. I couldn't even get her attention. She was working on it so hard. I'm like, it's time for dinner.
But that's good, though.
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
That's where you recognize that you've tapped into the curiosity of the child.
Yes.
And from an educational standpoint, that is what we need.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, education, in my opinion, causes a change in behavior. It's not a abundance of general knowledge.
Yeah.
An educated person makes decisions based on the information they have. It's not that they just have some information. Right. So I think in many regards, education needs to move away from just presenting content. And I wrote about this in my doctoral thesis. It's about creating an immersive educational experience.
Right. I totally agree with you. We did an immersion program for cybersecurity at IBM, and they take executives and anybody working in the company, and they'd say, okay, you are a cybersecurity specialist, and it might be the chief operating officer that's taking that seat, and the cybersecurity specialist might be the CEO having to talk to the press. And so they immersed in, it's not just solving the problem of cybersecurity, it is the whole thing, and having everybody understand that it's a really complex issue.
Of course. And at the end of the day, I think in the K-12 space, this is a perfect place to foster the idea of failure and learning from it.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I took on a project where we were partnering with the South Platte River wastewater treatment facility. Now, I have a background in mechanical technology. I know nothing about wastewater. But at the end of the day, I was talking to an engineer, and he was like, we could do a project. We could partner. So I said, all right, I don't have the information to do this, but if you're willing to partner with me, we could craft a project together. Now, Frannie, I'm jumping into this thing. I know nothing about wastewater treatment. I've never seen this plant before, and I'm going based on the idea of this engineer who didn't even work at this facility. But he was so enthused about the idea that the students would work on this project. So we crafted the project 2 or 3 weeks. We crafted the whole project, the mission, everything. And I took the paper. I was reading it the day before. I was supposed to present this to the students. And of course, the little person on my shoulder was saying, you don't know anything about this. What are you doing? But the other person was saying, we're going to learn together. We're going to learn about this wastewater treatment together. So of course, I went to the class and I was like, guys, I was trying to be real enthusiastic. I was like, guys, we're going to take on this project. We're going to redesign sections of this plant, and then you're going to present to the engineers and senior VPs about this thing. And one of the students said, Mr. Maduri, you don't know anything about wastewater treatment. I was like,
get off my shoulder.
I was like, I don't. But we're going to learn together.
Yeah.
And sufficing to say, Frannie, it took us a solid 6 weeks of this project where I broke it down in terms of what we needed to accomplish week by week. And I was there pushing the students, and I got parents involved, and the parents understood why when the kids were up late night working, they were invested.
Yes.
And so the day came when they needed to present, and my heart was beating because I was like, all right, cool. If they went and presented information that's inaccurate, they're presenting to the people that's doing the things on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I was talking to one of the students, and I was like, how do you feel? And he's like, I'm ready. Mr. Maduri, I'm ready. And it's like, all right, cool. If you're ready, I am ready. And at the back end of the presentation, one of the engineers said, I've worked with students from the School of Mines, and the quality of these presentations were such that I was wondering, are these kids still in high school? And it made me recognize that a lot of times the limitations that are placed on the kids in the K through 12 space are the limitations we put on them as educators.
Yes.
And that day I said to myself, you know what? No matter what it is, I'm going to start embarking on projects that will take me out of my comfort zone. And that's how I dove into the idea of what are the requirements to design an effective project? Not necessarily just the content, but what is the process that we need to go through to design effective projects? And I looked at it and I said, you know what? Every project from here moving forward, I'm going to utilize this process that I created, but I'm going to ensure that I am not operating in my comfort zone. And I can tell you, Frannie, I have students in college studying engineering now because of some of these immersive experiences. And they call me and they said, Mr. Maduri, I'm third year in college and I'm this and I'm that. And I'm like, wow, only because I was willing to get out of my comfort zone to support them moving forward. So it is so important for us in the K through 12 space to be willing to support our students. How can today's STEM leaders and companies build cultures of mentorship at scale?
Well, I think that they need to have some formalized programs, and also talking about how do you help somebody along and it be part of your job. I mean, it seems to me like it's always been part of my job to bring people along that have been, whether they're reporting to me or they're in a group that's tangential to what I'm doing, that it's part of your job to do it. I mean, and I was really discouraged to hear that there are some young women that feel like they're not getting that, and that they aren't not only mentoring, but opportunities. Like bringing them along, saying, I think you'd be good at this. I'd like you to get involved in this. And also championing them to hire leaders to say, you need to be paying attention to that person. Not necessarily just anybody. It doesn't need to be a woman or whatever the demographic you want to say. I think everybody starting out their career should have the opportunity for somebody to say, you know what, you're showing so much value and creativity and enthusiasm. I really would like to introduce you to somebody else. And that's the difference between mentoring and really putting your name out there. If you're endorsing somebody, you're giving a level of stamp of approval, and you need to be looking at around the room and say, how can I help somebody?
It's funny you'd say that, because so many leaders today, Frannie, are reluctant to wanting to, as you say, bring people along. Because bringing people along and giving them the information means that you are not necessarily in control of their growth anymore. And I think there's so many people who possibly are afraid of that. And I'm curious, because I think leadership in any regard is about the growth of people.
Yeah.
And if I'm leading and the people who I'm leading, they're not growing,
right, then
how am I effective as a leader?
Yeah.
What does that look like? How are you so comfortable to be able to do that?
Well, I do think that our proclivity to 90-day cycles puts people in a situation where I've got to meet my KPIs in this short period of time, and they can lose focus on the bigger picture of what they're actually there for as leaders. Okay. And they're there to work with a group of people and get synergy out of that group, and also elevate and level everybody in the group up. And so I think we talked about good leaders before. There are some mediocre leaders that are insecure.
Yeah, so true. You've received some incredible honors, including your own Frannie Matthews Day. How do you stay grounded? Because listen, the chip on my shoulder would be so big. Listen, I'm Dr. Maduri. How do you stay grounded?
Well, I will say that getting recognized is really nice. It feels good. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's what you do. And so, I don't know, my dad was just an amazing guy. And, at the end of, when I read some of the comments, not his obituary, but the comments from people on things that he did in his life that nobody knew he did. And so I think that that's more important on what you do. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to have somebody give you recognition. What really made me feel good was that my dad got recognition as Joe Matthews Day in Orlando, Florida in October of 91 or something like that. And it really made me feel good that I think he would have been proud.
Definitely. So this day was bestowed upon you here in Colorado?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in workforce and mentoring and STEM related stuff, and that was what it was for. Okay. Mayor Mike Johnston was kind enough to give me the award.
Okay. Well, congrats. That's phenomenal. So here's the thing. This podcast is built on the idea of why STEM. Why STEM in your life? Why STEM for someone else? Why STEM globally?
Well, I look at what our world is going to become, and we're seeing so much transformation so quickly, and that speed of change is happening because of technology. So if you are not participating in the digital economy in a meaningful way, it's going to be tough. And so I think that STEM, first of all, in the short term, STEM related fields pay well. They're growing in need. In fact, there are many open jobs in many tech-related fields. Mm-hmm. The other thing, as we had talked about before, if you've got expertise in one area, you've got the learning capability to make the leap into something you may not be comfortable in. And so I look at it as an important thing for our communities. We need to have a STEM or a digitally centric economy, because that's what lifts up everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Frannie, this was phenomenal. Frannie says you need not be afraid. She says that at least once you should be fired. So you get the opportunity to truly center yourself and think based on the resources you have, ultimately, which makes you better as a person. She says that one of her major skills were the ability to work with people and problem solve. Many of the things that I would attribute your success to, because even now you still have that sort of fire in your eyes when you talk about things that you're going to do or the things you've done. So listen, this was a phenomenal experience. I learned a lot from you, and I'm sure that those who will be hearing this via whatever media will garner some sort of positive from this experience. Again, this is the Why STEM podcast. We're here to ensure that as you move and listen to this podcast, you garner inspiration, motivation, but more so, you are challenged to think bigger, dream broader, and take action as we seek to inspire the next generation of STEM leaders. With that, I say, Frannie, thank you.